Hello everyone, welcome to Home with Isha Sesay. As always, we have a very busy show for you. We are starting today in South Africa, where there has been a spike in violence against women and girls since their lockdown restrictions were eased. One of the most shocking cases has involved an 8-month pregnant woman who was found stabbed and hanging from a tree in Johannesburg. The president has been speaking out, condemning the violence. We're going to be speaking to gender rights activists in Johannesburg about the state of South Africa and what is playing out in that country right now. Also ahead, the very latest on Ghana's health minister who has come down with COVID-19 and been hospitalized. Find out why some are now questioning the government's ability to keep everyone safe. We'll have a live report for you from Accra. And racism, white supremacy in these United States. We're going to be taking a closer look at the state of America. Everyone is talking about racism, but are we having the right conversation? We'll be talking to a famed anti-racist activist and educator, Jane Elliott. She's with us in the house today. All of that and much more just ahead. Let's get started. All right, one place to start, and that is with a check of the state of this pandemic in Africa. Let's bring up the 3 big numbers you should be keeping in mind today. Let's bring up those numbers. Total confirmed cases in Africa right now, 252,300. When we look at those that are active number cases, 130,682. And let's look at the number of deaths that have been recorded, well over that 6,000 mark, now approaching 7,000. 6,788, the 3 big numbers you should be paying attention to when it comes to coronavirus in Africa. All right, moving on. As the coronavirus pandemic has swept across the world, a shadow pandemic is moving alongside it. We have seen in recent months that this lockdown has triggered a surge in violence against women and girls at levels which are quite frankly shocking. In South Africa, which is currently with the highest number of COVID cases, they have approximately 73,000. The police force's gender-based violence hotline reportedly received more than 1,300 calls in the first 5 days of the lockdown. And since the restrictions have been eased, what we have all been seeing and learning about with horror is case after case of horrific violence against women and girls in this country. Here to tell us more about this moment that President Cyril Ramaphosa is shameful moment for his country is journalist and gender rights activist Nolwazi Tuzini. She joins us from Johannesburg. Nolwazi, welcome.
Hi, Aisha. Thank you so much for having me on.
It's good to have you here. Listen, I've been covering South Africa for a very, very long time and have been across the statistics detailing the violence against women and girls there. And pre-COVID, the police statistics showed that a woman was murdered in South Africa every 3 hours, which is shocking to even begin to try and get your head around. But you say this violence, this most recent uptick in violence, even for a country that had become somewhat accustomed to seeing horrific headlines, this violence is shocking many. Explain why you say that.
Look, I do think Tegofat's death and the way in which she was killed has definitely sent shockwaves through our nation. And I think more than anything, it's just because of the brutality and how gruesome her murder was. To imagine someone stabbed, multiple times and then hung from a tree as if to be lynched and at 8 months pregnant is a horrific thing to imagine, let alone live through as a country. So definitely, in the past couple of days, she was buried last week Thursday, laid to rest by her family. The conversation around gender-based violence in this country has once again become top of the agenda, has really taken over the headlines, our social media conversations, and I really do hope personal conversations in our families as well.
And let me be clear, some of the headlines I'm seeing are saying or attempting to link the surge in violence against women and girls to the resumption of sales of alcohol. Yet, as I was just saying at the top of the show, in the first 5 days of the lockdown where alcohol sales were banned, they saw something like 2,300 calls to the gender-based violence hotline. So as you talk to other activists, as you look at what's playing out, do you have any theories? Why do you think we're seeing such, not just every crime is horrific, but the level of brutality attached to the most recent cases is hard to fathom. Why is that?
Aisha, I think that the resumption of alcohol sales in this country is something that we need to look at, because there is a very direct link in South Africa between alcohol and its social effects and how it is that, it affects violence. For example, anecdotal conversations and evidence from doctors is that our casualty wards, since alcohol sales have been reopened, have been flooded once again with people that are involved in violent situations. I do think, though, that is a little bit of a distraction to the problem that exists in this country. In South Africa, there is a war against women's bodies, regardless of the coronavirus, regardless of a lockdown. I mean, the fact that we had, the figure that I've got is 87,000 calls in the first week to the police that were gender-based violence related, gives you an idea of how bad the situation is. And I mean, Tegofatsepule's death is horrific, and it was really brutal. But we have had many brutal deaths before that. There was Aline Boysen, who was also brutalized. There was Uyinene Mkhwejana, who was killed in a post office going to pick up a parcel. There was Karabo Mokoena, whose boyfriend chopped her up literally into pieces and put her in a bin bag and then burned her body. And that's the kind of violence that we're dealing with in this country, the kind of brutality. So has lockdown and coronavirus contributed? Sure, because now you can imagine abuse victims are stuck in these homes with their abusers with no way out. So I do think that might have contributed. There's an organization called Green Door, which helps abusers that I spoke to during the time, and he has spoken about how he's had so many more women coming through. So I do think the closed quarters, the inability to move around, the inability to run to friends or family when you need to is a contributing factor. But I think that we must be honest about how big and how awful this problem is in South Africa in general.
And Noazi, you've actually been running workshops. You've been involved in some workshops with men pre this moment, the moment of being, coronavirus and COVID-19. And I'm really interested to know what you took away from those conversations. You make the point that men have to be part of the conversation. They have to be engaged to find a solution that brings an end to this violence. What are your insights from those engagements?
The insights from those engagements is that the majority of men that I've engaged in those workshops really are not ready to have the difficult conversation, because the conversation is that you are part of the spectrum of violence, right? That you contribute to gender-based violence, even with your microaggressions and in your small behaviors. That's very difficult for men who consider themselves good men to understand and to want to take in and internalize. I call it, the good man syndrome, or the myth of a good man, where South African men, especially the ones that I deal with in my workshops, assume that the men that are raping and killing women in this country are a big boogeyman in the corner, some horrible criminal, some horrible monster. And what statistics show us from the Medical Research Council a couple of years ago is that 50% of the women that die of unnatural deaths in this country are killed by their intimate partner. So these are men that we fall in love with, that we live with, that we befriend, and it's not the big monster. And when I go to executives or professional men or ordinary men that consider themselves good men, and I say this to them, it becomes a very difficult conversation for them to internalize. And unfortunately, that's where we must start, because I believe that is the root of our problem. And that's really where we need to begin, around socializations, around your views of women, your thoughts around women, and how it is that even in small ways they dehumanize women, and in the bigger ways lead to you killing the soon-to-be mother of your child and hanging her up in the tree.
And Noazi, the police, what are we hearing from police in light of these most recent horrific crimes? First of all, any suspects in the frame for the murder of that 8-month pregnant woman who was found hanging from a tree in Johannesburg?
So as it stands, in terms of Khomotso Pule's death, the police are currently investigating her boyfriend, whom she was last seen with. And they are not wanting to confirm or obviously deny anything until those investigations are done. Excuse me. And this really is the story in this country. There are a lot of investigations that happen, and unless it's a story like Khomotso's, like Uyinene's, like Karabo's, that really makes big news, there are a number of women, many women that have died in this country, and their families have never ever been able to receive justice. I myself, in my family, can speak to you about a cousin of mine who was killed by her boyfriend in her mother's house, and that man, this was about a decade ago, that man continues to roam free. Another cousin of mine, her mother was killed by her boyfriend, who in fact was a policeman, and that man died without ever spending a day in prison. There are women in this country who die with protection orders, which is your version, I think, in the States, of a restraining order. Protection orders in their hands, in their hands, and they die. And because the police is not there to protect them. Really, our police service is not trained properly, is either not properly trained to deal with these situations, or people just don't care. Because at the point at which I have a protection order in my hand, you are supposed to enforce this. And how is it that I still end up dead after having gone to police services to seek help?
First, let me say I'm sorry for your family's loss. That is just truly awful. As you talk about the police not doing enough and stepping up, something that you can personally speak to, what about the government? The President, Cyril Ramaphosa, coming out, in recent days saying this was a shameful, a dark moment for the country. I know that there was a gender council that was set up last year. My understanding is it's not really operating in a meaningful way right now because of funding. Do you think that this is a moment that will see a renewed commitment and certainly an urgency on the part of the government to tackle this issue?
Aisha, I really do hope that it will. The reason why the Gender Council even exists at this point is because women in this country decided to shut this country down in August last year, which is our Women's Month in this country, and to say basically that we're no longer willing to live with the kind of fear and in the kind of fear that we live in. And it was a nationwide protest in this country. And I remember when that protest was happening, initially the president wouldn't come out and see the protesters in Pretoria, and had sent someone else, and protesters stayed there until the late hours of the evening, waiting for the president to come and address the women of this country. And he eventually showed up and has begun implementing some of the things that were in the document that was handed over to him. But as you mentioned, despite the fact that there is a gender council now, the biggest issue now is funding. And funding in terms of gender-based violence is a huge issue in this country. South Africa was one of the first countries in the world, for example, to have sexual offences courts that were built and specialized courts to deal with these kinds of issues. Many of those courts have since closed down because of a lack of funding. And so I believe that our country has many good policies, great laws, and we just fail women when it comes to implementation. And so I really hope that President Ramaphosa is going to begin to put his money and his political will where his mouth is.
Yeah, we all certainly hope that. I've got to ask you also about the pandemic, coronavirus, which is plaguing South Africa. You have the most cases on the continent, over 73,000 at present. What's the state of the government response? How widespread is testing right now? What can you tell us?
Aisha, we're not doing very well in testing. We've had just over 1 million tests, and we have a population of 54 million people. So our testing rate isn't great. But I will say this, that in terms of the communication around COVID-19 and coronavirus, I do believe that our government has done really well in terms of that. So we were expecting the spike in cases, because if you remember the way that our President Cyril Ramaphosa communicated the lockdown, it was not to stop the spread permanently, but rather to slow it down in order to allow for our health department to properly prepare itself for the oncoming onslaught of increased cases, which is what we're seeing now. So South Africa is now going into the peak of our coronavirus graph, and especially now we're in our winter months at the moment. So I do expect, many people in fact expect, that our infection rate is still going to continue climbing at alarming rates. There's a lot of fear in the country as a result of that. But I do think, for me personally, I take heart in the fact that our recovery rate at the moment is very good, and our death rate, even though each and every death must be mourned and is grievable, is quite low at the moment. We're sitting at about 1,500 deaths, which, if you look at the scale of the problem, is not too bad. So what we're hoping is that what the Department of Health said that they were going to do, which is to prepare themselves to save as many lives as possible as we go into our peak, is exactly what's going to happen.
Well, Nolwazi Tusini, we can't thank you enough for your insights today, not just detailing what's happening in the country when it comes to gender-based violence, but of course this latest update on the fight against this pandemic. Thank you so much. Nolwazi Tusini, journalist and gender rights activist, we really appreciate your time today. Please stay safe.
Thank you so much for having me, Aisha. The same to you.
Just shocking details out of South Africa in recent days when it comes to this violence against that has just surged since their lockdown restrictions were eased. A story that we're going to stay on top of for you here at home with Isha Sesay. We want to go from the southern part of the continent now to West Africa, and specifically shine a light on Ghana and what is happening there. This past Sunday, the Ghanaian president, Nana Akufo-Addo, confirmed to the nation that the country's health minister had indeed contracted the coronavirus infection and had been hospitalized. It had been reported, but it was confirmed on Sunday by the president. The president saying in an address to the nation that he would like to take the opportunity to wish the hardworking and indefatigable Minister for Health a speedy recovery from the virus infection, which, as he described, contracted in the line of duty. The health minister is just the latest Ghanaian government official to be infected with this virus. Just a few days ago, it emerged that the mayor of Sekondi Takoradi had actually died from complications of COVID-19. We want to get the very latest on all of this now from Accra. Joining us from the capital is journalist Melvin Talu. Melvin, welcome back. Good to see you. Melvin, can you unmute? These are the joys of broadcasting with this new technology and the mute unmute button. Melvin, can you
hear me now?
Thank you, Melvin.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Welcome back to the show. It's always good to have you here. Let me start by asking you for the latest you can share on the health minister's condition.
Okay. On Sunday, the president, as you said, confirmed that he was diagnosed with coronavirus. And at the moment, we heard that he has been taken out of hospital and he's resting at home after taking treatment at the University of Ghana Medical Center or Medical Hospital, which is the treatment center for VIP and patients, VIP people who have been diagnosed with coronavirus. So it was the same University of Ghana Medical Hospital where the mayor of Sekondi, Kobinan Sam, died. And it was the same place that the health minister took treatment. And we understand that he's at home and he's taking treatment and he's resting.
Melvin, do we know when he contracted this virus? Because there has been some mixed reporting on that, and I'm wondering whether you can clarify when he contracted it and his movements.
As to the exact time when he contracted the virus, that has not been made known. The president, as you said, ELLIOTT, confirmed confirmed that he has contracted the virus. Earlier, there was misreport that indeed he was suffering from diabetes. Others said he contracted the virus, and there is still that misreport as to what really is the issue, because the a renowned TV presenter, Ifya Pokwa, told us that she spoke with the minister, and the minister told her that he was fine, everything was okay. And then an aide to the minister had reportedly told the media that he was suffering from diabetes and not coronavirus. And now people are saying the minister himself may seem to be afraid of stigmatization. So he doesn't want people to think that he's suffering from coronavirus because of the stigma surrounding coronavirus in Ghana. So that's what we know. But the exact time as to when he contracted, that detail has not been made known to everyone.
Okay, thank you for giving us more context on that. How is it all being received? What has been the reaction to the health minister, the man in charge of Ghana's coronavirus pandemic response, actually, basically falling victim to the infection? What are people saying?
I must add that it's not just the health minister who has contracted virus from the health sector. As we speak, we have been notified that the head of the Ghana National Insurance Authority, that is NHIS, Dr. Selby, has contracted the virus. She has contracted the virus. So the virus seems to be hitting high-profile people in Ghana by the day. The health minister is not the only person. Dr. Selby is diagnosed with the virus, as we have been made to know. She's the latest high-profile person being treated for the virus. There's misreaction, as is always the case. Some people are saying the government is trying to do PR stunt with the cases of the health minister. Some people are saying the minister is afraid of stigma. Some are saying government is not being truthful. So it's that sort of misreaction. But he's not the only person who has contracted the virus from the health sector. Dr. Selby is also diagnosed.
Okay, so that's an important. So he's not the only high-profile individual to contract the virus. So that leads to what measures are in place to limit the spread of this virus. I mean, how much urgency is now being attached to fighting this virus, this pandemic there in Ghana? Give us some context and perspective on the response right now.
Contact tracing is still ongoing. This morning, the Director General of the Ghana Health Service, Dr. Patrick Abuachi, told the media at the press briefing held at the Information Ministry that they are stepping up contact tracing, that they will not stop contact tracing, they will continue. Just this evening, I learned that the Volta region has stepped up contact tracing because the cases there are increasing. So contact tracing is one of the measures that is still enforced. And then, like the president said on Sunday, now wearing a face mask has become a legal issue. If you are not wearing face masks, it's seen as an offense, because the president said it's an executive instrument that you must wear the face mask. So everyone in buses and commercial vehicles must wear face masks. Police are stopping buses along the way to check if people are wearing face masks. Just this morning, I was in the bus. I forgot my face mask was in my bag. The police had to make me to wear my face mask. So everyone is being urged to wear face masks, and it's failure to do so could be seen as an offense that could be that could result to punishment. So everyone is being made to wear face masks. And then the president also said people should take personal responsibility of their health. They should exercise. They should eat local food to boost their immune system. So the other measures in place already are still being enforced: hand washing, no face mask, no entry in certain public offices like Ministry of Information, all government ministries. Without face masks, you can't enter those premises. Without washing your hands, you can't enter those premises. There are buckets, Veronica buckets outside, hand sanitizers, soaps, everything. You have to wash your hands before you enter those places. So steps have been taken to prevent the spread of the virus, but still the virus is spreading.
You mentioned being on a bus. I know that the president continues to open up the country gradually. Where do we stand now in terms of what's open and what's yet to be open? Paint a picture for us.
Okay, so right now we have restaurants open, but some of them offering delivery service. We have hotels still open, but beaches are not yet open. We have some sporting activities now open, like athletics and gymming. All these have been open. All the restrictions have been lifted. We have tertiary students starting school yesterday. Final year university students started school yesterday. We are expecting senior high school students to start school on the 22nd of June, to be followed by junior high school students on June 29. So a lot of areas have been open, but not everywhere. Football is still under restriction. People cannot play football in a competitive manner still in Ghana until further notice.
Which I can imagine in Ghana, a lot of people are very unhappy about. What about your borders? What's the situation with your borders? Because, of course, much of Africa's cases, or many of them, certainly at the beginning of this pandemic, were imported. So where do things stand in terms of opening your borders there in Ghana?
Surprisingly, on Sunday, the president did not speak on when the borders will be open. During his 10th address, he said the borders would remain closed until further notice. His 11th address was on Sunday, June 14, but he said nothing really about when the borders will be open, or when should we expect the borders to be reopened. So as we speak, the borders are still closed, but there are people still coming to the country through special arrangements. Ghanaians who are stranded outside Ghana, people from Nigeria, Ghanaians from Nigeria, Burkina Faso. Just this morning, the Foreign Affairs Minister told the press at the Information Ministry that 14 Ghanaian mine workers from Burkina Faso had returned home. 7 Ghanaians from Nigeria returned home through chartered flight. And the other time, 230 Ghanaians did return from Kuwait on a charter flight. So people are coming to Ghana. Ghanaians who are stranded across the world are coming to Ghana. We are expecting 400 Ghanaians to return home by the end of this month from Washington, D.C., New York, and then China.
Okay. We shall be watching very closely what comes next. Melvin Talu, we always appreciate you joining us here on the show. Thank you for your great reporting. Please stay safe. Take care of yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome, Aisha. Thank you too.
All right, so getting the latest from Ghana for you, where as you were just hearing, Melvin, and the health minister has now been released from hospital and is at home resting, recovering from the coronavirus infection. The country is opening up. Large sections of the country have opened up, but borders remain closed. And as Melvin said, no competitive football. We'll stay on top of the situation in Ghana for you. We want to shift gears now and turn from the continent to events here in the United States. Headlines here being dominated by the recent protests sparked by the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis on Memorial Day. Those scenes of protest overshadowing the coronavirus pandemic, which is still very much an issue here in the United States, but for now put to the side. So let's talk about the conversation that everybody is having right now, which is around racism, it's around white supremacy, it's around the very foundations of these United States. Racism is being part of the fabric of of this land long before even America was America. And that is a fact that Black and brown people in this country know all too well. But it does seem as if for many white Americans, the scenes of protest triggered by George Floyd's killing have triggered something of an awakening, something of a renewed commitment to really fully understanding what Black and brown people have been experiencing for such a long time. So what we've seen in recent days, numerous statements coming from corporations across social media. We've seen social media platforms go black, go dark. We've seen statements from white celebrities declaring that they now understand. Everybody is wanting to have the conversation about racism. My question is, are we having the right type of conversation about racism? There's no better person to be having this discussion with than Jane Elliott, who you likely have seen across YouTube or Instagram in the most recent weeks. She's a famed anti-racist activist, educator, and I'm so pleased to say she joins us now from Iowa to discuss all of this and to share her thoughts. Jane Elliott, welcome. Jane, I'm going to ask you to unmute. It's the curse of the new technology. Just hit the mic button, and hopefully you won't disappear. Jane, can you hear me? You are there. I think you've just flipped the camera. This is the new technology. We're going to get Jane back for you. We're going to get her unmuted. She'll be back. She's going to be back in a few seconds. So let's get that taken care of. Jane Elliott, as you can see, is in the house. She's just not in the room yet. She's in the house. So we're going to work on getting Jane set up, and let's move on and bring you a conversation that I had a little bit earlier about the Wadabi tribe. This is a tribe in Niger. We're spotlighting them because this is a small group of herders and traders that are known for their beautiful customs and traditions. Is Jane back on screen? Jane, can you hear me? Okay, not yet. Okay, so I'm going to ask. Let's take her down off screen, and I'll bring the story of the Wadabi. So we have the story to bring you of the Wadabi tribe in Niger. They're a small tribe of herders and traders known for their elaborate attire and traditions. And like so many of us around the globe, they've been caught up in this coronavirus pandemic. Their way of life has been severely impacted, and it has led to high rates of starvation amongst many in the tribe. Their worries and concerns of contracting this virus and concerns about their food security prompted two women from London to step in, two women who have worked across the continent for many, many years and had built a relationship with this tribe. Thanks to the power of technology, they were able to help. Take a listen to a conversation I had with journalist Mandeep Rai about all of this a little earlier. And Mandeep joins us now from London. Mandeep, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It is so good to see you. So tell us more about these women and what they did for the Wadabi tribe.
So we're talking about Angela Fisher and Carol Beckwith. And these two women have been working across Africa for the last 45 years and have covered 45 different countries in this time, 150 different tribes, and really covered their ceremonies from birth to death. And within all of this coverage, which has really taken their lifetime, one of these tribes were the Wadabi tribes from Niger. And these tribes they've been working with now for over 3 generations. These ladies have created 17 different books, and one of those books is called Nomads from Niger, and this tribe is really prominent. So they have a very close relationship and a very reciprocal relationship. And given this context, when the ladies found out that actually due to COVID-19, the markets had closed, and that the tribe weren't able to sell their goats, they weren't able to gain the milk that they would have done from the goats, because the Sahara and the Sahel, the southern part of Niger, was becoming drier and drier over this 10-month period has extended. So all of these factors combined, the markets closing, the fact that their goats aren't being fed properly, has meant that they've had to augment their diet. Rather than having milk and having millet, they're now kind of on their bare bones. And so access to millet became really important. They're close to starvation, and some people have, in fact, died. And hearing this, the ladies thought, what can we do? And they created a Just Giving page and basically started to mobilize people in the outside world to understand the plight of these nomadic tribes.
COVID-19 hit, their markets closed, the nomad markets. There were no traders coming in. They survive on sacks of millet to augment their diet of milk. And they had no means of getting food. They were starving in the desert. And in addition to COVID-19, they were at the 10-month limit of the dry season. The rains have not come. It's completely dry. So they were starving. And Angela and I thought, we have to help them. We have to do whatever we can. Well, in the last 10 years, the children of our wonderful Wadabe chiefs have mobile phones, and they go to the top of a sand dune and they call us. And in full day, they tell us all about how their lives are and what their struggles are.
And you understand full day?
And we both speak full day. So we heard early on that they were really struggling. They had no way to get these sacks of millet, which will last several weeks for a large extended family.
And so then when did you decide you'll create a Just Giving campaign? And
we first heard the news about 6 weeks ago, and we decided that we had to do something immediately. And we did a Just Giving fundraising campaign, and due to the generosity of 80 different people, we raised $5,000, and that was enough to actually buy 100 sacks of millet, and a sack of millet feeds a family in the Sahel for several weeks.
So they managed to raise $5,000 within just a few days from 80 significant givers. So normally a bag of millet would cost $12, but due to inflation, due to the fact the markets were closed and millet is now becoming so prized, it costs $40. But even with that price, they've managed to buy over 300 sacks of millet. So actually, there wouldn't be 300 sacks of millet, it would be less, but managed to save or feed 300 families or over 1,000 people. And so basically have covered them for 3 to 6 weeks. However, now already I know that people are in need again. This situation, because it's going on and the markets still haven't opened, that need is still pressing. And so the ladies have made sure that the Just Giving page is open. Okay, that went really well and really successfully. But in fact, if you go onto their Instagram page today, if you go to African Ceremonies and you go to the second tab, that's the Wadabe Just Giving page, and immediately you would see the link to the Just Giving page. And the wonderful thing is that the money goes straight to the people, like every single penny or cent goes straight to the tribes, and there've been 3 kind of central points, so that it's not just going to one part of them, but actually being dispersed so that families across the region are getting access to the food.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. Going right around the world to get help for a tribe in Niger. Mandy Pride, thank you so much for bringing us that story. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're very welcome. It's the value of reciprocity. These ladies have received so much from these people for all their lives. The tribes took them in, and so the ladies thought naturally it's our turn to give when they need it most. So thank goodness for technology. Yeah. Thank goodness for connections, for you to know Creative Visions, for Creative Visions to know African Ceremonies, for me to know African Ceremonies. Therefore, we're all one big family, and you see it at times like this when you need it most.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. It's the link that keeps us together. Mandy, be safe. Take care.
Thank you. You too.
What would we do without technology? Thanks to technology, we were able to have that conversation with Mandeep a little earlier. And thanks to technology, we have Jane Elliott with us from Iowa. Jane, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
I can.
It's a miracle.
It is a miracle. Welcome to the program.
Well, thank you. It's a real pleasure and a real honor to be here.
Oh, no, the honor is ours. We are thrilled to have someone as acclaimed as yourself, who's done such important work on the issues of racism and really studying white supremacy for decades. So given that context, that you've been doing this work for over 50 years, when you look at what's playing out here in the United States, these scenes of protest, Black people, white people taking the streets, saying that the time has come for change, for dismantling the system of oppression, how do you view it? And maybe more crucially, does it feel like a significant moment to you?
I am absolutely encouraged by the number of young people of all colors who are getting out in the street and taking the chance of being labeled as something other than believing in the human race instead of a number of races. If we can get enough young people involved in this, they will vote in November, and we will vote out the racist, sexist, ageist, homophobic, ethnocentric person who is occupying the White House right now. They offer us a tremendous amount of hope. Hope, for me, is an acronym for holding on to positive energy. That's what these kids are doing. They're young, and they're ambitious, and they're determined, and they're committed, and I think this could be a huge change. But it wouldn't start until we saw a Black man lying on the ground with a policeman's knee on his neck. And we've seen that over and over and over on television. I think it's time to stop showing that now, because I know what that does to little Black boys. It intimidates little Black boys, and it frightens their mothers. We don't need to have that shown over and over now. Now we know what happened. If you want to see it, Google it, but don't show it over and over to kids, little kids. This is totally insensitive. This is another form of racism when you keep showing that, which says, this is what we can do to you if your son gets out of line. And getting out of line in this country is just falling asleep in the driveway at the Wendy's and the police get called, or asking a white woman to leash her dog in the park, and the police get called. This is sending the wrong message to all of us. It says to white people, you can do these ridiculous things and get away with it, but if you're a young Black male, you dare not be walking down the street where there is no sidewalk, because then you're accused of blocking traffic. This is the kind of thing that happens to Black people in this country every day. It's time to put a stop to it.
I mean, I couldn't agree more, and I feel very strongly about the playing and the replaying of the video of George Floyd. It has to end, and it continues to perpetuate the devaluation of Black bodies and them being disposable. So I feel very strongly about that. Jane, let me ask you this. From all the studying you've done, can you help me and our viewers understand why there is this perpetual fear of the Black male? We can talk about Black women separately, but these violent cases of recent days that have kind of brought people out in the street, although there's still Breonna Taylor and Sandra Bland, I don't want to minimize any of those, but it's different. So let's start with the Black male. From your studies, what underpins that fundamental antipathy, animosity that some white people have?
Well, that's the result of years of white males being afraid of the size, the shape, and the intelligence of Black males. We have been taught to be afraid of those who are different from ourselves, particularly white women. And that is a holdover from slave days, when white overseers and owners were doing things with the Black women in the slave cabins that they didn't want their white wives to be doing with Black men in the slave cabins. And so they created this myth about Black men, and we are still living with that today. But the point is that whether you are, whatever your color is, you are a human being, and you have the right to be called a human being instead of a different race. There's only one race on the face of the earth. If we hadn't created the myth of race, and it isn't a myth is something you make up to explain something in nature that you don't understand. A lie is something you make up to justify your undesirable and ignorant behaviors. The myth of race is the lie of race, and we need to start talking about it as a lie instead of a myth. Calling it a lie gives it some kind of, it sort of makes it okay. It isn't okay. It's a flat-out lie, and we need to get over it. There's only one race. And since, if you read, oh Lord, I wish I could tell you the name of that book, it's on the tip of my tongue, but you know how that works. If Women's Reality by Ann Wilson Schaff, if you read that, that will help you to understand why we have created this myth where black males are concerned and why white males right now, white males are more afraid than ever because we all know that within 30 years, white people will have become a numerical minority in the United States of America. Within 30 years, the people who are going to be running this show are going to be black men, and that's a fact. And white people who call themselves white, are absolutely terrified that black people are going to want to treat us the way we have treated them. It's fascinating to see what happens when I say that on a college campus. Invariably, some white woman in the audience says, "Aren't they going to want to treat us the way we've treated them if they get power?" I say, let's find out. 1,500 people at the University of Houston. Well, half of them were black. I said to the group, now, will every person in this room, black woman or male, black males, if you want to get even with all white people, will you please stand up? 3 young black males stood up. Nobody else did. That white woman began to look really relaxed. Okay, that's okay. I say, they don't want to get even with all of us. Let's be honest about this. Well, every black person in this room who wants to get even with 1 or 2 of us, please stand up. They all stood up, cheering and laughing and high-fiving one another and just tickled to death. And this white woman is scared again. I said, no, there it is. They don't want to get even with all of us. Every one of them, however, wants to get even with 1 or 2 of us. Now, if you want to be treated fairly in the future, treat people fairly in the present. Just make sure that you aren't one of the 1 or 2 they want to get even with. Does that make sense to you? The blacks cheered. The white woman looked like, I didn't want to hear that. Of course she didn't want to hear that. She has to change her behaviors. She has to stop believing the education she got in what is, in fact, anti-social studies in this country. Did I answer your question?
So let me ask you this. I mean, I said this leading into you, that there's been this outpouring of statements from corporate America, from celebrities. There's been all this allyship and I saw this particular clip on social media of all these white celebrities saying very earnestly, I now understand. I have to, if I was to kind of speak plainly, I find it hard to believe that white people haven't fully understood what black people are going through, and there's this sudden awakening. I mean, how do you read it? I mean, you get it, you see the microaggressions, the macroaggressions that black and brown people face every day. So when white people say we now get it, are they being truthful or are they being disingenuous?
They're being truthful in their own way. They are admitting that they haven't had to pay attention for the last 200 years. They haven't had to recognize what's going on. And yet, if you read the book, The Color of Law, which was written by a white person, you have to read this book. You have to get this book and read it, because you will realize that it was really, we're talking about ignorance here. The people who write our laws have been educated to believe that there are 3 or 4 different races and the white race is superior. That's the education they have had over the last 200 years. They write laws that represent that education, until you realize how really ugly this has been ever since Columbus got here, actually, but at least since we had a Constitution. In the Constitution, it says that a slave is 3/5 of a person. The Constitution of the United States, you have to realize that we have been teaching this ever since before we became a country. That's what we learned. And in order for you to understand what's happening, you have to give up what you learned. You have to question what you learned. And you have to read everything you can that tells you another story. You have to talk to people who have been in this situation, but you don't walk up to the nearest black person, and I've seen this happen, and say, what's it like to be black? Oh my God, that's the kind of ignorant thing we say in this country on a daily basis. Right now, on the bottom of every television program, news program, there's a strip that says, America in crisis. America isn't in crisis. America isn't just the 48 contiguous states of Washington, Alaska, and Hawaii and the islands. America is everything from the northernmost tip of Canada to the southernmost tip of South America. That's all America. America isn't in crisis. The United States of America is in crisis because of our ignorance. And we're going to have to give up our ignorance and get re-educated. But we have to re-educate our educators first, because they've learned the same thing that you can't teach what you don't know. So educators are teaching a thing that they learned.
So, Jane, when you hear officials from the White House say, I actually didn't mean to make that sound, but when you hear officials from the White House and say there is no systemic racism in this country, that the policing that is happening in this country and these acts of violence against Black people is really being carried out by a few bad apples, you say what?
Number one, they're in a building that should have been called the President's Residence instead of the White House. The fact that we call that building the White House still is representative of how ignorant we are. I remember when Richard Nixon said to a group of white reporters, "I'm trying to save the White House for you white people." Now, think about that. This is ridiculous. That could have been stopped a long time ago. And when somebody in this White House says that kind of thing, it's simply another example of the ignorance in that group. My father would say, a man is judged by the company he keeps, and the best of company's none too good. Now, the company that Mr. Trump is keeping is none too good. It's not good at all. And once they get in his presence, they have to lower themselves to his level in order to be accepted by him. That's what he believes. He believes that there's no racism, which is why he said several years ago, pointed at a Black woman in his group and said, "I've got my Black person. I got my Black person ownership of another human being?" I think not, but that is typical of the ignorance that we see in men of his age. I'm 10 years older than he is. I'm 12 years older than he is. Oh my God. But I've had to learn. He hasn't. I'm a pale-faced woman. Women have to learn. Pale-faced men don't have to learn. They really don't have to, because they are automatically, if you're pale and you're male, even if you're stale, you still get rights that the rest of us don't.
Mm. So, in this moment, a lot of people are asking, what should I do? I will say a lot of, well-meaning.
Wait a minute, I can tell them what to do. Go to my website, Jane at JaneElliott.com. Download the printed learning materials that are there. One is a set of typical statements that white folks make that think they're not racist. The second is the clarifications of those statements, how people who hear them take them. The third one is a set of things, commitments you can do to combat racism. 18 things you can do in your own sphere of influence to combat the racism, at least in my country, and I think in every country. And the fourth is a bibliography. Read every book on the bibliography. But you need to start with, if you don't want to read all those books, you need to start by reading the April 2018. Yeah, look, these are twin girls.
I know.
Read this. Tell people to read this National Geographic magazine. April of 2018. You've got to read it, because it tells the story in a simple, absolutely beautiful way, and some of the illustrations in this thing are fantastic. The color wheel, all those 3 pages of people of different colors on the color wheel, and then the colors on the Black people and all the different shades of what we call Black. It is absolutely the most important magazine I have seen in years. Everybody has to read it. That's just one thing you can do. It's not expensive, and it doesn't take a whole lot of time.
I do want to ask you for your thoughts on this quote sent in by Stanley Lumax, and I'm fascinated to get your take on it. He wrote in and wants your thoughts on Dr. Neely Fuller's quote, "If you don't understand white supremacy, everything else will confuse you." What do you make of those words?
Number one, you have to understand that there's no such thing as a white person. You look at my shirt. What color is my shirt? What color is my shirt?
I mean, that's white.
That's white. Now look at my skin. Can you tell the difference between my shirt and my skin?
I'm going to leave that one alone.
No, you don't have to leave that alone because I'm not white. I'm speckled, I'm tan, I'm beige, I'm lots of things, but I am not white. My teeth used to be white and my hair brown. Now my hair is white and my teeth are gray. But if you're judging by color, then you're going to have to call me a very white brown person. This is ridiculous. It makes no damn sense. There's only one race of people on the face of the earth. And when you say something about white, if you put that in a sentence when you're talking to me, and I simply ignore the rest of the sentence because I'm thinking, you really think there's such a thing as a white person? If you want to meet a white person, go to Tanzania and talk to some of the people there who really are white, which is really frightening what happens to those people in Tanzania. It's you know, you find out. Well, their bodies have produced no melanin, so they are so white that horrible things are happening to them because they are too colorless. But in this country, being too colorless is seen as a real plus. It isn't a real plus. It's ridiculous to believe the myth of race at this time in 2020. And we're still believing something that we learned in the 15 and 1600s. To apply to the 21st century the vocabulary and the ideas that you exercise, that you believe, that you promulgated in those first centuries is ridiculous. If you're going to come into the 21st century, you better change your vocabulary and you better change your mythology right now.
One last question before I let you go. This system here in the United States, the racism and the elevation of white people above black and brown people, so white supremacy, has led, is working very well for a lot of people, whether you buy into it, if you're white or pale-faced, to use your language, whether you actively believe in it or support it, or whether you are just, you just happen to have been born white. You are the beneficiary of this system. Do you see people giving that up? I mean, realistically, there are a lot of people who are doing well from it, who are benefiting from it. So, what's the incentive for people they're
going to have a choice. They aren't going to have a choice. Within 30 years, you'll have no choice but to give it up. That's the way it is. You better get prepared for it now. You better start behaving in the present and treating people in the present the way you want to be treated in the future, because the time for the myth of the rightness of whiteness is over. We have proven by those young people of all different colors out in the streets all over the United States this last 3 weeks, we have proven that you don't have to be white to be right. And it's time for everybody to realize that and to start planning for tomorrow, when it's just all right to be a human being. There's only one race, it's the human race. And it's time for people to start wearing my sweatshirt that says, what does this one say?
What does it say?
God created one race. It says God created one race, the human race. Human beings created racism. Anything you create, you can destroy. We could destroy racism in 2 generations. I've done it with students at the 3rd grade level, at the junior high level, and in corporations. I have destroyed the idea of the rightness of whiteness in those areas. We could do it. If one person can do it, think of what 1 million teachers educating that way could do. We could change the face of humankind to be regarded as all humankind.
Jane Elliott, it is such a pleasure speaking to you. We could keep you here all day. We won't, because that would be wrong, but you have been you've been so illuminating, and we thank you for sharing your insights and being so generous with your time today. Please stay safe. I'm telling you in advance that we'll probably come bothering you again in the weeks ahead to get more of your insights, but thank you for today.
Well, thank you for calling me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jane. Take care of yourself.
You too. Bye now.
Bye now. Thanks. I don't know about you, but that was amazing to me. It was fascinating to hear such candid, unvarnished talk in this moment, and just laying it out there that people have to unlearn what they've learned. And it's time. Not tomorrow, not next tomorrow, not in the future, but now. The time is now, because change is coming and you cannot hold that back. And let's talk about the way people are responding to this moment. I was just saying with Jane that we've seen these statements being put out by individuals and from corporations. A number of corporations in recent weeks have put out statements expressing solidarity with protesters in this moment and the general fight for racial equality and Black empowerment. But some are calling into question these statements that we're seeing from corporate America and asking whether it's really just the bare minimum, and really also asking, you can put out a statement, but what's happening behind the scenes in your companies? And so we're looking at corporate America, looking at the actions to see whether they measure up with the statements. And certainly one company that has for a long, long time, well before now, been walking the walk is Ben & Jerry's ice cream. They have been involved in social justice issues for decades, and in this moment put out a number of very strongly worded statements, standing in support with protesters, condemning the killing of George Floyd, and going another step further and launching a new campaign called Justice Remixed. It is an ice cream company, so it does come with ice cream as well. That's okay. It has a brand new ice cream flavor that is meant to do good for the fight against criminal justice reform. I'm pleased to say that Jabari Paul, who's the US activism manager at Ben & Jerry's, joins us now to talk about what's happening behind the scenes. Jabari, welcome. And remember to unmute. It's the joy of the new technology. Jabari, can you hear me? Oh. So hit the mic, hit the unmute mic. It's Jabari. First of all, Jane Elliott is like 40 years older than you, and she. So Jabari's going to figure out how to unmute. He's not the only one, because if you're watching television right now, you know that this is happening on every platform. Mainstream television, digital, everyone's being asked to mute and unmute. So it has become a bit of the bane of everybody's life right now, getting our guests to do this. But we're working on it. Some reaction to Jane Elliott. Jabari, we're going to let you figure that bit out. I'm going to just bring everyone up to speed with the comments that have been coming in while I did that conversation with Jane Elliott. And everyone seemed to be really as taken with her as I am. Michelle Moore says, I'm going to go back and watch the whole thing afterwards. Alim Abubakar Yila says, Jane Elliott should be given a form of award. I have never recollected her being nominated or receiving an award. She should be a Nobel Prize winner. Let's start the campaign. I'll support that campaign. And Bev Archibald says, we need Jane back on a Wednesday. Okay, so if you're new to the show, you'll know that on Wednesdays, or you won't know, but on Wednesdays, we do something called Deep Dive Wednesday, where we bring experts in and we have an hour-long conversation with them about a headline, a story dominating headlines around the world, and we go deep. We ask the questions, we get the answers. Everybody's involved in the conversation. Bev Archibald saying we should bring back Jane Elliott for one of those. We actually might. Good suggestion. Sia Boss says she is a phenomenal activist. Aminata Radiosai says statements are cool, but we need them to show they've answered our call to action. This goes back to this whole issue of a lot of people coming out and declaring solidarity, standing as allies with Black and brown people in this moment. But it's not just a statement. What comes next? Emmanuel French says eliminating deep-rooted racism requires the maximum. Requires a maximum truthful and unwavering involvement of everyone across the board. The number of young white folks protesting along with colored people gives hope for the future. Certainly the number of white folks protesting with Black and brown people does indeed give hope for the future. Lots of people just saying how much they love Jane. It's Billy, I like this lady, just lots of comments on this. We are still working on Jabari from Ben & Jerry's, who we have standing by to tell us about Ben & Jerry's efforts in standing with protesters. Let me read you some of the statements that they put out recently. One of the things they said was the murder of George Floyd was the result of inhumane police brutality that is perpetuated by a culture of white supremacy supremacy. What happened to George Floyd was not the result of a bad apple. It was the predictable consequence of a racist and prejudiced system and culture that has treated Black bodies as the enemy from the beginning. That's part of a statement put out by Ben & Jerry's in the aftermath of George Floyd's killing. More comments coming in. Augusta Chroma said, Aisha, this episode is very interesting. I will rewatch it again and again. Let me just say thank you to everyone who tunes in every day and takes the time to be part of this conversation. I appreciate each and every message. So thank you for that. We are still working with Jabari. We're going to give it a few more minutes and then we'll see how it goes. If it doesn't, then we will bring him back. We're back here live on Thursday, and so we'll bring him back to talk about Ben & Jerry's efforts then. We're going to give it a few more minutes. And while we wait, I do want to tell you about Thursday's show. So actually, I just lied. It would have to be next week, because on Thursday, we're doing a very special show in partnership with HCR. We are shining a spotlight on the plight of refugees, because it is World Refugee Day just around the corner, and we are going to be taking a closer look at what refugees are going through and how their lives have been impacted by coronavirus. We have a short promo. Do we have it to hand that we can share? I'm trying to. Nope, we don't. We played that yesterday, so you missed that yesterday. But we're doing this special show with you in HCR around issues around the displaced and what they're facing right now. It's a great show. We have the voices of people from right around the world. I do hope you can join us. It'll be same time, same place on Thursday. That's what's happening on Thursday. So we'll get Jabari on next week when we're back on Monday to talk about Ben & Jerry's efforts. So I want to say thank you. We are out of time, so we're going to have to hit pause on today's show, because that does it for us here on Home with Isha Sesay. Still haven't quite figured out the tech issues at Jabari's end, but we will be back with a jam-packed show next week. I do hope you can join us. I do hope that you'll go back and rewatch the Jane Elliott interview. I think she left us with a lot to think about and a lot to consider, and to keep writing in. I'll be on social media. We can keep that conversation going on that platform. Thank you again for today. If you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, I appreciate you. Please stay safe, everyone. Bye for now. We will see you back here tomorrow with a deep dive and a live show of Home with Isha Sesay next Monday. Bye for now, everyone. Thanks for watching.